preacher down there. Yeah.
You mean that's first lap?
First wife made it out of behind his house. She'd take my automobile, go to the door and get the stuff, come back and make it.
I don't know if that's sister.
And I'd go down there and get it, bring it up and divide it between the two sisters. He'd give me a pint and bring it up, and they'd give me a pint each and bring it up.
It was early in 1933. The nation was in a depression. There was little or no work and even less money. Across the nation, 13,600,000 people were unemployed. President Franklin D. Roosevelt developed his New Deal as a way of countering the rampant unemployment and economic despair that resulted from the Great Depression. An important part of his effort was the development of the Civilian Conservation Corps, an organization unique in American history. The CCCs were a group of men, primarily youths, but also World War I veterans or skilled laborers in their own companies. These men were organized in CCC camps across the country and utilized for a wide range of skilled and unskilled labor in the American wilderness. One of those CCC camps was where we're standing today in the former town of Mortimer along Wilson Creek in northwestern Caldwell County. All that remains today is a large white building now used by the U.S. Forest Service and a few concrete foundations from various buildings that made the CCC camp a self-sustained village. A bill authorizing the creation of the CCC was passed by the U.S. Senate and House and was signed by the President on March 31, 1933. The first CCC members were enrolled on April the 7th of that same year. By 1935, more than 505,000 men and boys were enrolled. Before the CCC ended, there would be 4,500 camps nationwide. The Mortimer Camp was one of the first opened in North Carolina on May 20th, 1933. It would be the home to the men and boys of Camp 403 until the program was disbanded after the start of World War II. Company 412 was located in the Globe community on May 30th, 1933, and Company 433 located at Buffalo Cove on September 28th, 1939. The Civilian Conservation Corps was set up as a program for young men between the ages of 18 and 25. However, later conversations have shown that some young men twisted the truth a little bit and started their terms at the age of 16. The men built much of the nation's infrastructure. At the same time, they had the opportunity to attend school. They learned to read maps and acquired other skills that would help them in their adult lives and careers. Nationwide, here are some of the CCC's accomplishments. 46,854 bridges were constructed. 800 state parks were created. 4,622 fish-rearing ponds were created. 3,980 historic structures were restored, among them the Gettysburg Battlefield. 5,000 miles of water supply lines were laid. 3 billion trees were planted. 3,470 fire towers were built. 97,000 miles of fire roads. In return for his work, a CCC enrollee was paid $30 per month, of which $25 was sent to his family, leaving him $5 for personal expenses. Despite its name, the CCC was in many ways a military organization. Young men enlisted in a military fashion and were subject to military discipline. After being accepted, they would be transported to Army training camps for 5 days of basic training by the military. CCC equipment was military in origin. They used open-bed Army trucks and wore Army uniforms. Their living quarters were military-style barracks. The officers were either regular or reserve military men on active duty. They had marching drills, lights out, and KP duty, all part of the military. But there also was a civilian touch. While the CCC men were led in some ways as soldiers, they also were mentored as students. Such leadership probably was needed by the young men, many of whom were far away from home for the first time. A CCC enlistment was for 6 months and could be renewed 3 times for a total service limit of 2 years. Many men chose to stay more than 1 term. Others, not taking to Army discipline, would leave early. The list of projects completed by the CCC goes on and on. Right in their own area, there's the Blue Ridge Parkway, built largely by CCC members. But let's bring it even closer to home, right here in Mortimer, where the former CCC men are meeting today. Mortimer, Edgemont, and the Wilson Creek Valley had been opened up at the turn of the century by Ritter Lumber Company, which built the town of Mortimer. The area was hit by a devastating flood in 1916. However, there still was timber to be cut and transported out by railroad, so Ritter Lumber and the Carolina Northwestern Railway took the lead in rebuilding. But that was not to be the case 24 years later. Ritter Lumber Company had moved out. An effort to operate a cotton mill had been unsuccessful. The people who stayed depended on farming and small logging operations. Then came the flood of 1940, which further devastated what was still there. But there were two hopes. One was the U.S. Forest Service. The second was the Civilian Conservation Corps, Company 403. The men and boys of the CCC had been at work in the hills and hollows since May of 1933, working with the U.S. Forest Service. The work had included improving the few dirt roads in the valley and building new ones. They built bridges across the creek. The flood of 1940 covered much of the CCC camp with water, and some of the buildings were destroyed. Bridges were washed out. Roads were damaged. Homes were washed away. Approximately 180 men at the CCC camp at that time went to work immediately, repairing, rebuilding, and replacing roads and bridges. We can't imagine today what the entire Wilson Creek Valley would be like had there been no CCC before and after the flood. But now, let's talk with some of the former CCC members here today. We're sitting here now with 82-year-old Stacy Davis. Stacy's a resident of Lenoir, but at the time he went into the Conservation Corps, he was 16 years old and living in Lincoln County. And Stacy, when you first went in the Civilian Conservation Corps, what camp were you assigned to?
The Globe, 412.
Camp 412 in the Globe?
Yes, sir.
And when did you arrive up there?
Halloween night, 1935.
So, did they have a Halloween party for you when you got there?
I scared them to death.
Yeah.
Got more treats.
Well, how long did you stay at the camp in Globe?
Approximately a year and a half, and then moved to the Mortimer Camp.
Well, what did a young, strong 16-year-old Stacy Davis do during that period of time?
Well, when I came in the Globe Camp, I worked on the road, helped build roads and fire trails, and cut out some bad timber and crushed rock to put on the roads, and ran the motion picture projector, and then I became a cook.
How was it decided what work you did?
Well, they just chose you at random, the foremen, you know. They'd say, I want this man, and they would pick you.
So when they chose you to be the motion picture projectionist, they just picked you out? You had no prior?
Well, yes, I had prior experience. I worked in the theater in Lincoln when I was younger. Well, during that road work and rock crushing, was most of that work done by hand? What kind of equipment did they have at that time? Well, they had air compressors and jackhammers, air hammers, and we'd drill down into the rock. And Will Church, he handled all the blasting. And he would shoot the rock out, blast them out, and then we would break them up with a hammer, get them in small pieces where we could put them in the rock crusher. And the rock crusher would sit in the middle of the road, and we'd put the rock in. It would crush them, and as it moved down the road, it would gravel the road at the same time.
So that stone was used to gravel those roads that you guys were building.
Mm-hmm. And then we'd get some out for the bridges on the parkway. Mm-hmm. Pretty stone.
Well, what about your career as a cook?
Well, I went into the mess hall as a pastry cook. Learned to cook pastries, pies, cakes, and Then I made bread, biscuits, cat heads they call them.
Yeah, big old cat heads.
Yeah. And some of the boys wanted to use them in the rock cracker. But we was afraid it would break the crusher. So we didn't.
Well, how many men were at the Globe? How many folks did you have to cook for?
Mostly 200.
Yeah.
Yeah. When the camp had its full crew, there were 200 men.
Now, when did the Globe camp close, Camp 412?
Sometime in 36, I'm not sure.
Well, why did that camp close so soon?
Well, we had finished the projects that was assigned for us to complete over there. They were completed. And we moved it to camps where they needed men, you know, to bring it up to force. And
so when Camp 412 closed, where did you go?
To Mortimer, this camp.
Did you have a choice to come here?
Had Morganton or Mortimer, and I chose Morganton. Mortimer.
Mortimer. Well, did you have a chance to return home at that time? Was it like the military? You enlisted for periods of time?
Six months at a time. The enrollees could only stay 6 months, and then they would have to leave. But we had what we called local men, you know, that men that were exempted from that, and we could sign up 6 months, and then after we served that 6 months, sign again. And I stayed approximately 6 years.
So local men or local to the camp could stay as long as they wanted?
Yes, as long as they were, you know,
useful.
Exempted, useful men.
Useful.
Yeah.
But guys who were like military draftees could only stay for one term and
6 months.
Well, how far away did men come from to work at these camps?
We had men from as far away as Georgia. I've heard there were some from Florida, but I didn't know them.
But those were the guys who usually just stayed the 6 months?
6 months, and then they had to leave. They've, you know, gave them schooling and trained them to do different jobs.
Yeah. So after the Globe camp closed, then you transferred here to this camp.
Mm-hmm.
What were your assignments while you were here?
Well, first I came over as a pastry cook and cooked and ran the motion picture projector. And later on I served as a mess steward, prepared menus and took care of the food and see that we had food, you know, to serve the men, and was over the cooks.
Yeah. Now, when you first came in the Corps, was that, you had to go through basic training, sort of like the military?
No, we came in, they gave us some calisthenics and things like that and taught us to march, which was helpful later on in life when we went to the military.
So after your Civilian Conservation Corps career, you went into the military?
Yes, sir.
What, as we sit here now, of course, there's one building standing here, and behind us is a rock wall with some foundations of some buildings left up there. What did this look like while you were here?
Well, there was a Forest Service house at back of us here where its offices were located. And down in front of that house was the Forest Service garage where they sharpened steel and worked on the trucks and machinery and whatnot. And the camp was beautiful. It was a beautiful camp. And of course then the flood came and destroyed most of it. And the old Forest Service building is the only building left on the site. And we owe that to Brother J.B. Myers, who was in contact with the governor. They were going to demolish the building. And he got in contact with the governor, and he agreed to see that the building would remain here as long as we continued to have our reunions here.
And that's the building here close to us that's used by the Forest Service?
Yes, sir, the only one left.
But this building that is standing still today, that building was here while you were stationed here as part of the Corps?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about that flood. 1940 was a pretty devastating time up here, the flood, Wilson Creek, a lot of damage, a lot of property damage. What do you remember about that 1940 flood?
Well, it had been raining for approximately 3 days and 3 nights, and I was serving dinner. And it began to rain hard, and the milk truck delivered milk here to the camp, and he left and the water was rising. And I got in a car and went up through Edgemont to try to get to the Globe. The mountain had slid off, but I could see the tracks where the milk truck had went into the slide. I walked over the slide to the other side, and I could see where his tracks came out. So I knew that it hadn't trapped him. And I get back in the car and drive back down to the camp, and I floated through Edgemont. The water pushed me up against the bank and the car back around, and it pushed it back into the road, and I felt it jumped, so I knew the motor was still running. I threw it in second gear and floorboarded it. And when I came to the bridge, there was a bridge here below the camp. Monroe Coffee was standing in the road trying to stop me. My brakes was wet and I couldn't stop. And when I hit that bridge, Monroe said it left. But it was a short bridge, and I came on across, and I parked my car back of us here.
I miss your old buddy used to come up here with.
And I think it's 6 or 7 days before I could get it started again. It drowned it out.
But your car wasn't damaged?
No,
from that?
It ran fine after we got it started.
Why did you try to go to the Globe?
My wife was over there, and I was going to check on her and her family.
So while you were in the Corps and you had a vehicle here, you were able to have a private vehicle here?
Well, you wasn't supposed to.
Uh-oh, are we telling something that's going to get you in trouble?
No, too far gone now. No, several of the men had cars. We had them hid around in the bushes and
Well, how often were you able to leave camp?
Well, I could leave most of the time on weekends and sometime during the week, just so long as I had the menus prepared and saw that the food was put out for the men to eat. After the flood came, there were several homes destroyed, and people had to leave their homes and stayed in makeshift lean-tos and barns and whatnot, and we took food from the mess hall and gave to those people.
So you continued to cook in the mess hall for the guys in the Corps, but also provided food to the community?
What food we had left, we would distribute it, divide it with the people in the community.
Well, with this community pretty well cut off because of the flood, were you able to get foodstuffs in to prepare meals?
We had a warehouse in the back of the mess hall, and quartermaster provided some food, and we purchased fresh vegetables locally, and bought a lot of potatoes locally. But some people, you know, were isolated without any food at all, and we helped them out as much as we could. I think it was about a week before we got back to civilization,
Yeah.
if you could call it that.
Well, how much of the camp was destroyed or damaged because of that 1940 flood?
Several barracks on the upper end. They weren't completely destroyed, but we couldn't live in them. And the orderly room, which was below the mess hall, it was destroyed. Had all of our records and whatnot in it. But outside of that, everything was pretty good.
Did you guys rebuild the camp?
Partly. Did remodel the barracks, you know, that weren't damaged too bad, whether we could continue to live in them. And some of them they took down.
Well, what part of helping rebuild the surrounding community did you guys play? Did you guys help rebuild roads, bridges?
Oh, yes, we built roads and run telephone lines where they had been torn down, where we could communicate with Lenore and places like that. Took quite a while to get roads back where we could travel over them, because down near Collegeville, a lot of the roads were washed out there too. And we had to do a lot of repairing. But we had good men to do it.
So had the Conservation Corps camp not been here at that time, probably a lot of that damage would have gone unfixed for a long time.
Right, right.
Well, with the damage that was done to the camp, were all the camp members able to stay after the flood? If only part of the barracks were repaired, what happened to the people?
Well, they reduced the number of men in the camp. At that time, some of them left, and so they had adequate living space for them.
So, when did this camp close?
I believe in 41.
42.
42.
What time did you get out of this camp?
I went out in 41, I think it was.
So you were only gone from this camp a short period of time before you went into the real military?
Yes, sir.
Were you guys aware of any deaths or anything like that may have come from that flood in 1940?
Well, not in this area, but other areas.
Well, when the flood came, was there any kind of warning? Did you have any idea that the flood was going to be that bad, the damage was going to be that great?
We had a short warning. Hollander, he was a Forest Service man. He lived up above Edgemont and there somewhere. Henry Hollander. And he called down and warned us that the flood was coming. And it hit about 30 minutes after that.
And that was in the evening or afternoon?
Evening. I'd say about 5 o'clock in the evening.
So with 30 minutes warning, what kind of preparation did you guys have?
Didn't have time to do much of anything. we were feeding the men and their dinner in the mess hall, and so they had finished that, and when it hit, and some of them was back in the barracks and getting things moved around, you know, where to help save what they could. And I don't remember whether they removed the records from the orderly room or not. I know we put some stuff in the mess hall, which was on the hill, and the water didn't reach.
So from where we're sitting now, the mess hall was
back of us.
And back of us up on the hill?
Back to our right.
Mr. Davis, when you left here to go into the military, did you leave here to go into the military, or did you just get out and go home and ended up in the military?
Went back home and then was called into service. And I went to Fort Ord, California, and to Macon, Georgia, where I was cadre and trained troops for a short while. And then my outfit went overseas as a unit.
Where did you go?
To Okinawa. Well, we first went to Hawaii, where we took some training to invade Okinawa. And from Okinawa, I stayed there and went to Saipan, and from Saipan back to Okinawa, and from Okinawa into Japan. Stayed there 2 years.
So how long were you in the military?
Oh, reserve time and all, 6 years.
And then after the war, you came back to North Carolina?
Came back to Lenore and lived there for a short time, and was worked for Ethan Allen and was transferred to Florida, where I did service work for Ethan Allen.
Now, when you were here in the flood, you were on your way to the Globe to see your wife. Did your wife live over there? Or?
Yes, sir. The flood washed got in their house. It didn't wash it away, but it was full of water, and they left and had to stay in a barn on the side of the mountain with some other people. Some of the community had all gathered there because that little shed was on the hill, all the protection they had.
Yeah. Was your wife from here? Or
yes,
where?
She was from the Globe. And Philip Gregg and myself, we left here and hiked across the mountain to Globe that night. We waded in mud and water up to our armpits. Had long sticks in front to guide us to where we wouldn't step in holes. Cut a huge tree down, hemlock, across the creek there in Globe, and walked across the next morning to the family.
Okay. Well, Mr. Davis, thank you very much for sharing some of your memories with us, and we certainly appreciate your time.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Bless your heart.
Okay, we're pleased to have with us now Jack Filial. Jack is 80, currently lives in the Whitnall area, and was here at this CC camp by 1941, 42, I believe, Jack.
Yes,
is that correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So you came up here after that 1940 flood.
Yes, sir.
Why did you join the CCC?
Well, back then there wasn't no jobs nowhere, you know, and we needed a little money for the family, you know, because we was on the farm. And I decided I'd come to the CC camps, and I come to CC camps in 41. And Bill Vines was my supervisor, and we worked out on the roads for a while, and then pulled me off of the road and put me in a fire tower. And from the fire tower right up in the hall here was the garage, and I mechanic for the government for the rest of the duration that was in here. And coming in 1942, while they was closing down, in August in 42, and I decided I'd go home for a little while, and I went home for 6 months and farmed the rest of the year, and went to the Army in 1st of November in 42 and stayed till 46. And the flood was awful. I lived over in Maple Grove, and we lived down the holler, and we left out and went to Maple Grove Church and stayed that night. And it was terrible, the mountains coming in and flooding, but it didn't bother our house, but we was uneasy and all when we left there. So I went to the Army and stayed going on 4 years. It's counted 4 years, and I was went to California in 42, last 42. Stayed out there for a year and a half doing 90 millimeters. I was a fuse range setter on 90 millimeter and an aircraft gun. Went from there to Seattle, Washington, and stayed up there for about, in the quartermaster, stayed up there for a couple of weeks and come back to Texas and got in the guard business, guarding during the prisoners. And I was MP guarding them for a year and a half, maybe, or better. And then after the war, I had to help transfer them back overseas.
Yeah.
And then after 6 months after the duration, I got my honorable discharge and came back to Illinois. Ever since then, I've lived down in Illinois and worked in the furniture factory for 33 years and retired at 65. Not working nowhere, staying at home enjoying my retirement.
Do you come to many of these reunions?
Yeah, I've been to most every one of them.
How long have they been doing the reunions?
Oh, let's see, I'd say about 33 years.
Yeah?
Because I hadn't been married long, and they had me and my wife come over here. They'd been doing at least 33, or maybe longer.
And is this a reunion of just the folks who were assigned to this camp, or can anybody who was in any camp come?
They said that anybody who had been in the CC camps was eligible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they want their folks and their children, you know, grandchildren to come, because they want when we all get gone, to keep going on.
To know what it was all about.
Yeah, know what it's all about. So.
Well, when you were here for that about a year's period of time, you did mechanic work and
road work
in the fire tower.
Yeah, and road work.
So how did you get those kinds of assignments?
Well, I'll tell you what, they said I was a good feller and honest, and said they wanted the best. That's why they took me off the truck, Bill Barnes. They said they wanted volunteers, and I sat on it, and nobody raised that man said, "Come on, Phil." And Bill Barnes said, "My God," said, "you're taking the best man I got." And he said, "Well, that's what we want."
That's why they wanted you.
Yeah. So they had confidence in me, you know.
Yeah.
So that was a good fella for the work.
Okay.
And I went to the Army. I've always done what they told me to do, you know. I've done good, and so come home.
Well, when you worked in the fire tower, was that an 8-hour shift? How long did you work up there?
We worked it weeks at a time up there. A week at a time, and then they'd bring another up and relieve us, you know.
So where did you sleep and eat while you were up there?
We had a building, a little round building up there with glass all around it where we could see, you know, fires everywhere. And when we see smoke or anything, we had to call in the camp.
I got married.
That's where it's at in location. We had a map, you know, telling us where it be and everything. You know.
So you lived up in the tower itself?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Me and one more CC boy.
For a week at a time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I come out of there and they put me in the garage, and Al Thompson, he was a head man over the parts, you know, supply room. One day he said to me, he said, "Pay y'all?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do you know what?" I said, "No, I don't. What is it?" He said, "You've saved the government more than every mechanic's ever been here." I said, "Well, good."
Why did he say that?
Because, see, I fixed things that didn't even have new parts in it. I was a good mechanic back then, but now this new physically put out these cars and trucks. I don't know nothing.
Yeah, you can't work on them today. Okay, well, Mr. Phil, y'all, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much. And with us now is John Harrison. John's 80 years old, lives in Granite Falls, and John, you were a member of this camp back in the late 1930s. Tell us about when you were here and some of the activities you were involved in.
You don't have a badge on. No, I was the time that I was here, I was mostly a truck driver. The work that I done.
How were you chosen to be a truck driver? Why did they?
Superintendent, Mr. Hart. And I don't know where that came through with somebody else or what, but he called me up to the office and was asking me what I'd like to do for the Park Service. And I said, well, it looks like a truck driver would be a pretty good job. He said, well, you got that choice.
So what kind of truck did you drive? Or trucks?
GMC dump truck.
And these?
At that time we had Chevrolets and GMCs. We had two Fords. One was, which I was later on, I was kind of a straw boss, run a compressor. What we call a portable compressor to travel from different places. Pop shot and what we call pop shot in the ditch lines of the road.
So most of the work assignments you guys had during that time were building roads?
Building roads.
What kind of equipment did they have back in the 30s to build roads, other than manpower?
Well, we had some of them called them the dippers back then, run by cables. We call them backhoes today.
Yeah.
And bullnosers.
Were those gasoline engine or
yes,
steam?
They were all gasoline.
All gas?
All gasoline. And we done motor graders, bulldozers.
So you
had our own quarry up here. And different pop shots for the gravel we built the roads with.
So you would have most of the same equipment that road builders today would have?
They were just a little different, Senator.
Yeah.
You know, at that time, like the bullnosers, you had 3 clutches and 4 handles to use instead of 2. Today they got little buttons about like this.
Yeah.
You can do this and it does it itself. And your graders had the wheels that you turned to turn your blade. You used it by hand to set your blade. But outside of that, I mean, like everything else, it's stepped up. But I really enjoyed being up here. We made a lot of good friends.
When you left here in 1939?
Right.
What did you do after you left here?
I went to North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, and started driving tractor and trailer. I left them and went to driving the bus. These under Greyhound people.
Yeah. And then I guess it was just very shortly.
Right, but
World War II came along.
Well, while I was driving the bus, Uncle Sam called me one day.
Had a job for you.
He said, I got a job for you. Which I didn't know, but my commander over here told me, he said, you just might well leave like a lot of the boys were leaving going into the regular army. And he told me, he said, if I was you, I'd just go ahead and pick what I wanted to do. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I was young and we'd heard all this stuff about World War I, you know, what was going on in Europe. But being young, that was going in one ear and out the other. You know what I mean? It was not that serious.
Yeah.
But I went in the Navy, and that's what you call a gunnery officer. We were the ones that protect the soldiers, and all equipment is being shipped overseas.
How long were you in the Navy?
From 42 to 45.
Oh, being in the CCC, was that sort of like being in the military?
Well, yes, in one way.
First name.
Put that in this way. Yes, in one way it was. I mean, being here and working for the bar service, but living under Army regulations, you know, across the ranch there, it helped an awful lot. It really did. It was. We learned discipline. We kind of grew up. We learned what it was to take orders and to meet people, you know, different people, and young men, you know.
Well, being a group of young men, I'm sure there were some who tested the rules from time to time. What kind of discipline did they have for those people who didn't follow the rules?
Well, most of the time, well, that kind of happened to me. That kind of happened to me. We had a crusher and quarry right up the road here, like going to Edgemont. And superintendent called me up there and told me, he said, I'm going to let you work with Joe Culberson, which he was a foreman. And he said, Mr. Thompson will tell you what, at that time he was working in the warehouse.
And put us in city France and put us.
I come down and Ad Thompson told me, he said, Harrison, I got the very thing you need. I didn't get to ride it where I walked and carried a 16-pound sledgehammer. That was discipline, just, you know, to let you know that, you know, don't break the rules, because we got a way to do it. Well, the Army side would put you on KP, which most grown men today know what KP is.
Did they have KP here at the camp?
So we go on KP, we'd wash pots and pans and dishes, maybe for the weekend, and that would be the end of it.
Well, what rule did you break that you had to carry that sledgehammer up there?
I was leaving over at the Globe. We were what we call pop shotting on the Globe Road that comes from Collinsville up number 90. We were pop shotting over there, and Bill Vines had his work crew over there, and me and this boy, Craig, I can't remember his given name. I'm sorry I can't, but we were good friends, and he was like a young stout mule, you know. And so I was driving the compressor. I was kind of in charge of how much drilling had to be done, how much, and what Bill Vines wanted done. You know. We started back on a Friday afternoon. I got to the top of the Staircase Mountain fine. Had no B model Ford with that big compressor on, which everybody knows that the B model didn't have brakes on. And but I got up there and got along fine. We come on over what's called top of Joe White Mountain. And I said, well, this is going to be great. So I pulled that thing out of low gear back in the second. As I did, it didn't want to turn. The steering wheel just didn't want to turn, so it just runs out up over the edge of the road, and it had a bank up, oh, maybe 2 foot. So I just went up on it and stopped. Bill Vines and his crew was behind me. And I didn't know it at the time being, but some of the boys had been picking up a little white light. And the boy that was working for me, he had some. But I didn't get penalized, much as they penalized or abused or anything like that for that. They came along and he unloaded his men and hooked a chain to it, and then they loaded him back up and pulled me back into the road. They came on in and backed up and parked right there. And they come out and told me, I don't remember where it was Ozzie or where it was Mr. Thompson, but one of them said, Mr. Hart wants to see you two boys. So that was easy, right up the steps there. I got up there, and Jimmy Hart was a secretary, which was not related. And Jimmy looked at me and grinned, and he said, he's waiting on you. So we went and turned and walked into his office. And he and I were, let's say, good friends. Yeah. I mean, he was the superintendent, he was the boss of the Forest Service. Yeah, so we were good friends. I was riding home with him. Well, he lived in Hickory, North Carolina, I lived in Granite Falls. And he'd say, the Lester, which that was the sergeant on the Army side, Lester Culberson. He said, if Lester don't want you washing dishes over the weekend, he said, I'm going home. He said, would you like to ride home and back with me? I said, I'll let you know. Thank you very much. We were pretty good friends. All of us was.
His office was right up here behind us?
Behind us, yes. But he told me, he said, I understand you're drinking. I said, no, sir, I'm not drinking. He said, well, how come you run off the road? And I told him. He said, and Bill Vines' work crew had to pull you back on the road. I said, yes, Claude Gregg he's passed away by now. What I heard, I hadn't seen him. But Claude is his truck driver. And I said, Claude and Bill pulled up, and I said, they looked at me and pulled me back on the road. He said, you drove on in and parked? I said, yes, sir. But he asked Greg, he said, are you drinking? And that was the question you didn't have to ask. But while we were talking, there was a pint of liquor slid right down on his shoe right out the floor. Well, he turned and looked at the ceiling, and then he looked at me. He didn't look at him, he looked at me, because he was supposed to be working with me. Yeah. So I don't remember just exactly what it was they put him, what his penalty was. I don't have any idea. But that's when he gave me the sledgehammer. And about a week later, I'd walk back and forth and clean that hammer up good and turn it in and pick it up in the morning, And pickup pulled up there one day, and Joe stuck his fingers in his mouth like this and whistled. All them sledgehammers out there in the quarry. One of the boys punched me, and he said, John, he said, Joe's calling you. So we hardly ever called, anybody Mr. Unless it was Mr. Hart or over on the Army side, But we were all friends. We're, all living practically the same life, And I walked out to the quarry where we was at, and I carried a kind of a sweat rag with me in my hip pocket. I took it and rubbed that hammer up. Walked out there, kept it with me all the time, but it's personally mine. Checked out. And Mr. Hart said, we got a fire down at Collisville, said we needed to go. But it's back at what's called the Johns River section. I said, I don't have any driver's license, remember? He said, I'll get them for you. So I went back driving the truck.
Okay.
And stayed driving the truck until the day I was discharged.
Okay. Well, Mr. Harrison, thank you very much for sharing some memories with us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, to share some memories with us now is Mr. R.Z. Hendren from Hidnot. Mr. Hendren's 88 years old and was here at this camp from, I think, Mr. Hendren, what,
1935 to 1939.
So you were here 4 years, 4 full years? What, how old were you when you were first assigned to this camp?
I don't remember just exactly how old, 22 or 3 years old.
And why did you go into the CCC?
Because there wasn't nothing else to do.
No other work to do? So when you came here, how much money did you earn?
$1 a day.
About $1 a day?
Yeah.
And while you were here, was this sort of like being in the military? They fed you and they gave you clothes and had plenty of work for you to do?
Right.
What kind of work did you do?
I done some of all kinds of that. About the first thing I done was pull a road machine for the road machine operator. With a 50 Caterpillar tractor, I pulled the road machine to start with, and after that I got into the garage a little bit, then I got out of the garage and got to run the bulldozer. I'd done all the work from Mortar here down to 181, all the bulldozer work on that road down through there.
So most of the work you guys did was building roads?
No. And then I come back and got into the mechanic business again and worked right in the end of that building there for over nearly 2 years.
This building that's
mechanic.
The building that's still left standing here is where you worked?
Yeah, right in that end of that building right there.
Well, how many roads did you work on during that 4-year time?
Worked on Watauga Turnpike and Joe White some, and then this new road running down the creek here to 181.
And you drove a bulldozer?
Yeah. I done all the bulldozer work from the creek down here down to 181.
Did they teach you to operate that bulldozer, or did you know how to do that already?
No, they taught me how to use it. Maynard Holler taught me a little bit, and he got out then, and the project superintendent come along and needed some bulldozer work done. He told me just go ahead and do the works. So I did.
So you didn't tear anything up, so they let you keep doing it?
Yeah.
Well, what were some of the things you guys did when you weren't working? Because you stayed here all the time. What were some of the activities that you did?
We played sports, basketball and baseball and tennis and stuff like that.
Well, how long was the work day? What time did you go to work, and what time did you stop each day?
About 8 to about 5.
So you'd work from 8:30 to 5 each day?
Yeah.
And this was Monday through Friday, or did you work on the weekends?
Most of the time we didn't work on the weekend on the job. Had camp duty, like in the Army, you have.
Yeah, so you would still have those weekend duties.
Yeah, weekend duties.
People still had to eat, so you guys were responsible for keeping your barracks clean in order?
Yeah, we had to stand and inspect it just like we did in the Army.
What were some of the things that was like the Army?
Well,
did you have to exercise and
take calisthenics every morning, and this, that, and the other? It was really a good thing. I learned lots of stuff here. I learned how to handle one of that 50 Caterpillar tractor to start with, and learned to run the road machine later on. mechanical business here a little bit, and then I went back to the bulldozer. And when I quit that, I come back to mechanic work. Worked as a mechanic here at the camp till 1939. I left here and went to the Asheville Forest Service repair shop.
You went to work for the Forest Service in 1939?
Yeah.
You left here?
Yeah.
And then, so the mechanic work that you learned here in the CCC
Yeah, some of it.
helped you through all your working career?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mr. Hendren, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you're welcome.
With us now is 81-year-old Thad Crump. Mr. Crump lives over in Burt County, but just across the hill. That's not so very far away.
No, a very short distance.
And Mr. Crump, I believe you were here when, 1933?
36.
1936?
Well, I was here for about 33 months. And left, and I went to work on the Blue Ridge Parkway after that.
After you left here, you went to work on the Parkway?
Yeah.
Who did you work for on that?
Nello Tier. I worked for Nello Tier till...
Was that when they were building the Parkway?
I was building the Parkway. I drove a truck up there. And I also built bridges. After the roads was built, the government built bridges.
Yeah.
You see? And I went to work with them. And worked with them till the bridge was built.
Well, what kind of work did you do when you were here at the CCC camp?
I drove a truck some and also cooked some. Just different jobs or whatever. Whenever they'd leave or need, and they find a man to do it, that's where they switch him to do.
So did you volunteer for that work? They come around and volunteer?
Well, no, you can volunteer for it. That's what they would do, you volunteer.
But did you usually have a choice of what kind of work you did?
Yes, to a great extent. If you could, I've done several jobs in here, different jobs. But my main job was driving the truck. And I found out that I got awful cold out in the wintertime, so the kitchen was good and warm.
Yeah.
So in the wintertime, I went to the kitchen and I just stayed in the kitchen. So, and that helped me out in the Army.
Yeah.
When I went to the Army, it was I got along good in every case of there and everything I went into. Just due to the fact that here taught us boys a great lesson.
And how did they do that? What kind of lessons did they
Well, they taught us the discipline, taught us how to work. See, I was raised on a cotton farm, and I didn't know anything about work except cotton work. Plowing a mule, gathering and picking cotton. And then whenever the Depression hit, we had to get away from there. So this CC camp was one place that you could go, and at that time, who could get a better thing than 3 meals a day and a place to sleep and clothes to wear?
Well.
And that was it's too bad they don't have it today.
Yeah. So you came here because there was no other place to work?
No other place. I worked for 50 cents more than one day down on the farm.
Yeah.
And whatever you could do.
So for that 33 months you were here, was the pay always the same? Did you ever get pay raises?
Well, yeah. I come in, I was making $30 a month. And all my sleeping, place sleeping, everything.
Yeah.
So when I got to cooking, they raised me $6 on the month to call second cook. So that was a big help.
So you earned $6 more a month by cooking.
I did, yeah.
Plus you got in the kitchen when it was warm in the winter.
Yeah. I stayed, and I have to see, with some time that I was out here working, driving the truck and what have you. I'm always telling this, that I drove the truck with hauled men out, And they built this road down through Mortimer and on out into 181. And so I hauled the men down, picked up the men right here, and hauled the men out. And got down there Just looked right up there, and there was 181. I said to the bullnozer man, I says, you think I can make it up there? He says, if you don't make it on your own, I'll put you up there.
Yeah.
That bullnozer.
He'll get you up there, won't he?
And so I drove up there and back. I was the first man driving from one end of that road to the other. I'm all I'm telling that because I felt like I'd done something. The first time I'd done something somebody else had done.
Well, the equipment that they used back then to build these roads, was it like the equipment that they use today, or what kind of?
Yeah. It was bulldozers and road machines and what have you. And this here guy, that guy right yonder, that you just got here, he was the big mechanic right here. He knew how to do all this work, and he was good at it. And there's usually about 150 to 200 people here, and we all got along good. You never see anybody having trouble, and so on. But if it did, there was little skirmishes about some little argument. And
yeah, but with that many young guys together all the time, there's bound to be problems.
Yeah, but it really wasn't, because there was some few mean ones in here when I first come.
Yeah. But
that didn't last long.
What'd they do? What happened to those guys?
Well, every time the new bunch come in, they was quarantined, you know. They wasn't allowed in any other barracks, and wasn't anybody allowed in their barracks. And so these guys come in, about 30, 40 of them. And these guys, 3 or 4 guys, old guys we call them, got out and got drunk. They come in and they turn them over and this, that, and the other. And first thing you know, one of the guys, the old guy, comes screaming, I'm cut. And so the lights was out, you see. They done turn the lights out there. The night guard done turn the lights out. They got the lights back on. Sure enough, he was cut. But nobody knows who done it. Nobody. But I'm pretty sure I know who done it. I wasn't there. No. But the guy he was on about, the man had to do it. Yeah. From where he's cut.
But when the new guys came in like that, why did they quarantine them?
Well, they had to vaccinate them.
Yeah.
They had to check them out for everything, and so for whatever it might be, and get all of the medical records and what have you. So you see, we just come in, signed up. I signed up there in Charlotte. They didn't ask me anything about my health or anything. And so when they brought me up here, they brought us up on a train to Lenore. And we got off on the train onto the trucks, and then we pulled out in here. No medical records, no nothing. So they had to quarantine us to get our record and what have you.
Well, did they have a doctor here?
Oh yeah. The camp was operated under the military. Army doctors, Army captains, lieutenants, and all.
Yeah.
And this is Forest Service here. Whatever, in the afternoon or the morning, whenever we get up and eat breakfast, we used to be over here at a certain time and go to work. And we'd work until the afternoon, get in about 4 o'clock. And when we walked across a certain line over here, we was back on the military side. Now we could go back as far as any time we wanted to.
Yeah.
But the Forest Service only had jurisdiction over us as long as we was over here working. Now we had guys in fire towers and someone like that the year round.
Did you ever work in one of those towers?
No, I never did work in one of them. So there's some guys, that's kind of a volunteer.
Yeah.
The guys always ask for it because all they had to do is sit up there and look.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. So But I was always wanting to get into something, do something, and do this. And after I found out I could do other things than farm, I kind of enjoyed doing other things. But it was, then it helped me out all the way through.
So when you left here after your 33 months, you stayed in the construction line of business, went to work building the parkway?
Yeah, building the parkway till it was finished, and then I had to go to somewhere to get a job, and I went to work in the furniture factory. And the biggest move I ever made, I reckon I moved from there to New York. I stayed there 2.5 years, moved there back to where I'm at now. 1956, I ain't moved since. I'm not going to either. I'll have to tell you what I was when I went down to Camp Wheeler, Georgia, training on the third day, the sergeant came to me. He said, "Where have you been in the Army before?" I said, "I've not been in the Army." He said, "You want me to call you a liar?" And they come in laughing. I says, "Well," he said, "No." He said, "I'll tell you," he said, "I noticed you the first day you was in here. But," he said, "I'm trying to find something to gig you over for 2 days and I can't do it." He said, "You know how to make your bed, you know how to say your shoes supposed to be, you know how to stand formation. He said, you know how to march." And he says, "I guess you can handle a gun just as good," because we didn't handle guns. Yeah. And I was grinning, and I says, he says, "You've got to be in the military." I said, "Did you ever think about the CC camp?" Oh my Lord, me and him was good of friends. He never bothered me no way, shape, or form.
But all those things he was talking to you about, you learned right here?
We had to learn right here. We had to stand formation. Yeah. And well, not only that, it sticks, you know, and you know, make all kind of movements, you know, like you do with guns.
Yeah.
And so on. And we, and too, you see, I was here, and as far as being out there in the field, in the Army, it didn't bother me.
You was used to that, wasn't you?
Used to it.
Okay, Mr. Crump, thank you very much.
Well, I don't know what I was supposed to talk about, but
well, we talked about the right thing.
Well, we're good.
By late summer of 1941, it was obvious the CCC was in trouble. The number of applicants had dropped and more men had started finding work elsewhere. By that time, the CCC had fewer than 200,000 men in 900 camps. Unemployment no longer was the problem it had been during the Great Depression, and there was a war to be fought. Many of the CCC's former supporters now agreed that there was still work to be done, but that the nation's defense must come first. A review of the program recommended the CCC be abolished by July 1st, 1942. The CCC lived for a few more months, but the end was inevitable. Technically, the Corps has never been abolished. Congress just refused it any more money, and the CCC moved into the pages of history.